Hello, so in today's video I'm going to cover the Hu Tao Mona double vaporized team comp and its rotation with Thoma included. I quickly wanted to mention that this team does not use Kazuha or Bennett, and I'll explain why later in this video. While Kazuha and Sucrose do provide a lot of output for Hu Tao's charge attack damage, I'm simply providing my testing of this team's rotation and an explanation of it. For Mona, there are two ways you can utilize her in this team rotation. She can either be a vaporized burst damage dealer alongside with Hu Tao. She can be a Thrilling Tales amplifier user as well. People that enjoy having these two waifus together in the same team might be interested in this. While it does not output any greater than Sucrose or Kazuha in the team, it's still a team that works very well in single target scenarios. It's also quite a mobile team as well, and I'll cover a further explanation of it very shortly. Let's start off with the basic testing. For my test, I'll be using level 1 weapons to test out the rotation. Bear in mind, I'm using the trial Thoma, which is C3, so his shielding capabilities and his elemental skill uptime will be different to a C0 Thoma. Unfortunately, I don't have Thoma. I've rolled up to 70 times now, and I'm not going to risk it any further, so trial Thoma in open world will be my test environment. But that should be fine, as I will significantly scale a lot of my damage down by using level 1 to 2 star weapons. I'm not trying to oversell the idea, but the team excels very well against mobile single target enemies. Now, what do I mean by this? Currently, we are seeing more elite enemies or bosses that have more mobility in their animation cycles, such as the Mechanical Array and the Magukenki. This means that not a lot of the recent enemies will stand and accept your damage like the Pyro or Cryo Regi bosses. For example, Bennett is a top tier support. However, he is limited in range. If you cast his burst at the wrong time and the wrong place, when an enemy decides to parry away from it, it essentially becomes a big waste. Now, I wanted to combine the idea of how Mona can vaporize her burst by using her normal attack while Thoma's burst is active. This essentially allows her to easily vaporize. It provides convenience and prevents interruption for Mona, meaning that Mona can literally stand there and not get flung across the room while waiting for the 2 seconds. So what actually makes this team work? In my perspective, is that knowing that we can apply Pyro first and after using Thoma's burst, and not having to sacrifice Hu Tao's elemental skill to do so in order to apply the Pyro, this is what brings a more synergistic feel to the team than previously on the first release of Hu Tao, where if you were to pair her with Mona to achieve a double vaporize, it was very clunky. For those who are Mona mains, this may have been a challenging aspect to double vaporize Mona and Hu Tao together on the same team. Usually, Bennett is brought along, but because Bennett would essentially be applying Pyro application just for Mona's vaporize burst, bringing him into the team essentially is a waste for Hu Tao, unless you plan to run Bennett with no HP artifacts, which forces you to play very carefully because you're not getting much heals. You could use Amber, but that team itself is quite challenging to pull off as well. If we do come across more enemies similar to the Magukenki with high stagger resistance encoded into their animation, then potentially I might substitute Thoma for an Amber in the future against these specific enemies. Besides double vaporizing, Mona can also act as as a Thrilling Tales user for Hu Tao, to amplify her damage even further of course, because the Thrilling Tales has a buff time of 10 seconds and pretty much the cooldown is 20 seconds. Once the buff is activated, the 20-second timer starts, so essentially it is a 10-second downtime, which works really well for Hu Tao. I would assume every odd number rotation, like 1 and 3 and 5, the Thrilling Tales will pop up for Hu Tao. It would just be a matter of keeping everyone's bursts synced together. And now I'm going to go through the build. I'm going to be very straightforward with this. Hu Tao, you build her like a champ. Pretty much whatever has been recommended. You can look up her build suggestions on the Hu Tao mains guide and their suggestions. But ideally, the recommended is the HP Sands and the critical rate circlet for pretty much the practical use. You would only use the critical damage if you have almost really god substats, or if you're planning to speedrun with a C6 Hu Tao, and then, Pyro Goblet. For Xingqiu, highly dependent on having the sacrificial sword in this team, giving him whatever you can use to emphasize his big damage in terms of artifacts. Mona, dependent on high energy recharge to keep up with everyone else. You could provide her with the Widsift for the double vaporized damage approach, or you could just use the Thrilling Dragon Tails for support Mona. Thoma, the Falvonius Lance, is quite ideal for him. I wish I could test him out with the Engulfing Lightning. I think this may have been good, but I am using the trial Thoma after all, so, there were a few issues with that particular build, but I would probably go with the Nobly set on him as a support Thoma, and on top of that, to loosen the strict rotation a little, provide him with 180 to 200 energy recharge. Provide him more energy recharge if he's still not synced up with everyone else. The greatest perk of not having Kazuha or Bennett with Hu Tao is that when we're looking at team comps today, we see a lot of teams' recommendations that ask for Kazuha and Bennett as a requirement in order to perform exceedingly well, especially with an Abyss or events that require 2-team setup. The great perk of not using Kazuha or Bennett in a Hu Tao team is that it allows you to build a second team with these powerful supports. Bennett and Kazuha work extremely well in the Child Vape teams, Raiden teams, Ganyu Melt teams, Yoimiya Pyro teams, and many more I suppose. Even I use Bennett and Kazuha for my Mona Vaporized team. While Kazuha pushes her peak damage, but at the same time, she already performs extremely well already with just Xingqiu alone. You could pretty much pair her up with any other off-fielders like Beidou and Fischl, and that team itself performs very well. At the end of the day, Thoma has brought Mona and Hu Tao closer together in terms of using them both in the same team, allowing them both to utilize their signature vaporized combos while also enabling the team to be very mobile. I did look up into a fair amount of suggestions for Hu Tao team compositions alongside with Thoma, and I thought I'd just share my option with Mona, as I'm a Mona main and I create a lot of content trying to incorporate Mona into every possible scenario I can. So hope you like this video and thanks for watching guys.